Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We're really excited to have Jeff Burgess here representing Safari Hospitality, and I think you do other things as well. So we'll get into some of that, but really grateful to have you here. So thank you all for coming so that we can make events like this happen. We record these just so we can put them on our website. A lot of people like to go back and watch them afterwards. So rather than like a formal introduction, getting your bio and stuff, we usually just have our speakers introduce themselves. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about you, your background, how you grew up, and go from there?
Okay, my name's Jeff Burgess. I've lived in Cedar City for the better part of 47 years. I could actually almost throw a baseball to my house from here, so we're in the house that I grew up in. My parents are Joe and Beverly Burgess. My dad was the mayor of Cedar City at one point and a city councilman for a few years. So been here forever. I graduated from SUU with a finance degree in 2004. My wife is Melina Burgess. I met her at SUU. We have 5 kids, and I don't know, been here in Cedar City forever. So
Awesome.
But
Cool. And I know like your family has been very involved. I think your mom is on the board for Southwest Technical College, so very involved in the community. And I know Safari Hospitality has done a good job too, supporting community events and supporting community any chance that they get. So, so can you tell us a little bit about how Safari Hospitality got started? Because that was before your time, right?
No, we started Safari Hospitality. My brother, myself, my brother-in-law. I'd have to probably take a step back further before Safari Hospitality to kind of get the whole picture. But my parents, my dad always was in construction. He moved to Cedar City from St. George as a plumbing contractor, plumbing and HVAC contractor. And always did a little bit of general contracting kind of on the side. He built the first hotel that he was involved in. Him and my uncle built I don't even know what it is now, Quality Inn maybe, right by McDonald's on 200 North. It was built as a Comfort Inn. They kept it. My dad liked to build it. My mom liked to do the actual operations side of it. And that was built when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. Okay. They kept it for a year or two, then sold it and built another hotel in St. George that they basically had throughout most of my life, actually, till 2003, I think. That was long before Safari Hospitality existed. My brother and I both were going to college, started doing a little bit of construction, general contracting. Building homes, 2005, 2006. And then right about that time, we had bought a farm that we were going to develop, and prices kind of got crazy, if you remember. Construction was crazy, prices were crazy. Decided that wasn't necessarily what we wanted to do going forward. So we sold the property, decided the hotel industry was something we hadn't done a lot of, but we had both worked for our parents in one form or another, front desk, housekeeping, whatever, at one point or another in our life. And so we're like, let's do the hotel thing and give it a try. So we sold that farm and bought the Hampton Inn and Holiday Inn Express here in town, which kind of was the beginning and what led to Safari Hospitality. At that point, there was no Safari Hospitality. We just did the management ourselves between the 3 or 4 of us, and that was in 2006, 2007. So we started with those 2 hotels. Today, we've got 46 hotels with 1,300 employees in 5 states. So over that 18-year period, Safari kind of evolved from a 1 or 2 man show to kind of what it is today. So
wow, that's amazing. So we hope to get into some of that. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of challenges and you've had to pivot and change things a bunch throughout that. So hope to get into some of that today. So it sounds like you kind of grew up around the industry, but didn't necessarily think that you would.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily what I enjoyed, the operation side of it especially. But we did We split all of our youth basically between Cedar and St. George. I mean, we'd Friday school would get out when we were younger, like young teens, head to St. George, work. Saturday, come back Sunday morning usually, so spend a day and a half there. My dad liked the gas station business. We had a gas station, and then next door on the same property was a hotel. My mom dealt with the hotel. My dad did the gas station stuff kind of on the weekends. We cleaned some hotel rooms, wiped down soda machines, stuff like that. Probably till the time I was 15. When it started high school, then it wasn't as frequent, but still, once or twice a month, spend a couple of days there. And so we always kind of were in and around the hospitality industry. So
yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a important point you bring up too. I think a lot of people, they probably see you now and are like, wow, you are so successful. You have this very successful business, but they don't realize all the work. I mean, you were doing things from the time you were a kid and starting with very entry level, cleaning the rooms and doing all that it's been built over a lifetime. I think a lot of people see success and think it must have happened overnight, or they just don't realize how much time and effort was put into getting there. So, and then can you just explain a little bit more? So you mentioned at first it was just the two of you. So how then Safari Hospitality came in? Like, when was it needed to become more the management company? And can you explain a little bit about how that works? Like, all these hotels, do you own them all, or do you have some that you just manage when there's still other owners, or how does the business model in that work?
Yeah. So basically how it worked, my brother, I liked the more hands-on in the field, dealing with the construction stuff. My brother's more of the numbers guy. And so technically, if you say, what is Safari Hospitality today? My brother's the CEO and president of Safari Hospitality. He runs essentially the day-to-day stuff with Safari Hospitality. I'm a partner in the company. I, serve as like a board type position. But my day-to-day is probably only 20% hospitality related. But I can still answer your question. So, when we first started, my youngest brother, who is a partner with us, and he's 8 years younger than me. So he was a partner when we formed the company. My dad and mom took 20%, and then the other 4 kids and their spouses took the other 80%, equally split. And at first, when there were only 3 or 4 hotels, it was easier for me and Jim and Logan to just take a hotel and deal with everything that had to do with that property. We worked with the general managers, paid the bills, did any paperwork, did any inspections, anything like that. And then as we either purchased or built new properties, we would just add a property to each one of our, plates essentially. I think we had 8 or 9 hotels, and we looked at it and realized that it wasn't effective for all 3 of us to be doing the same thing, but for 3 individual properties. Yeah. So we decided to kind of split up our roles, and Logan took a section, Jim took most of the operations stuff, I took the renovation construction side of it. So from there, Jim basically took all the operations stuff, and then we kind of just filled in some of the gaps and did the development and construction side. So.
Okay. And that's, you said when you had that was
I think it was 8 to 10, somewhere in that. I don't remember the exact. It was actually a transition process too. It didn't all happen at once. Right. We had a general manager who was a good friend of mine in college. I think you know him, Wes Costa, who came on right when we first purchased the Cedar City Hampton Inn and Holiday Inn Express. And he kind of always was right there with us to be kind of an intermediary between us and the general manager. And so once we got to that 8 or 9 properties, we moved him out of a general manager role kind of to a regional manager. And so we were able to do it with, Jim overseeing all of that with Wes, and Logan and I took some of the other responsibilities. So,
okay. Is that the point too, when you had to start hiring more people to help?
Yeah. At that point, we hired a full-time bookkeeper. and CFO, like financial, that dealt with all the week or monthly financials in-house. And so we just kind of changed how we were structured at that point.
Right.
But to answer your question on the structure, Safari Hospitality doesn't manage any properties that we don't own, at least a portion of. We don't own. We have a small investment group, so we don't have a big pool of investors, but we do have 8 or 10 investors who own with us all of the real estate.
Right.
So between our small group, between the Safari Hospitality owners, and then I've got an uncle and 2 cousins in St. George, between the 8 of us, we control 60 to 70% of the real estate, as well as the management company.
Okay. So that probably comes with challenges, but also probably makes things a lot easier in other ways too.
Yep. There's very few hotel companies our size that have that small of a group of investors.
Right.
So it's been really good for us because we don't have to answer to a group of investors. We answer to ourselves, and we can make decisions quickly, and not a lot of red tape to get through. So my dad always said he'd rather own 100% of one hotel than 1% of 100, and that was kind of the philosophy we took. So
yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk about a little bit of the process? And I don't know how involved you are specifically with this, but what it looks like when you're considering a hotel to purchase versus find a location to build a new one. Kind of what are some of the key factors that you're looking at to make
when
that
we
decision?
first started, it was there was no science to it. It was we're in Cedar in St. George. We had access to property in St. George, and we were in the construction realm, and so we built our first the first hotels my parents built or they owned. They construction 100% of the time. When we did the Hampton Inn and Holiday Inn Express, that was the first properties that we purchased, and I don't know if initially, like I said, there was more. It was as much guesswork as science. I think there were some basic metrics we looked at. Today, it's a lot more sophisticated of a process and a lot more difficult of a process too. With the valuations and markets are way more saturated than they were 20 years ago when we started. So in reality, I leave all that stuff to Jim. He deals with most of that. He says we're going to go build one right here. I said okay, I'll go deal with that part of it.
Yeah.
But, typically, a typical deal structure was 30% equity, 70% debt. We've used a couple of local banks, which have really facilitated our ability to grow. That relationship has helped us grow to where we're at today. So,
and I feel like, did you guys feel like having relationships with those banks is, many of the successful businesses have said you want a relationship with a bank before you actually need them. And so having that trusted relationship now, I'm sure makes it way easier through the process.
It makes it doable, when things turn around, if there's a downturn, that relationship can help get you through a slow time. And if the bankers have a little bit of faith in you, it goes a long ways. So
yeah. So I find it interesting. You said you got your finance degree, right?
Yeah.
But then you decided you would much rather, like you said, you mentioned you've hired a CFO for the company. So
Jim's the CFO, and he has a finance degree. And then Jace also has a finance degree and a master's of finance from Vanderbilt. So between all of us, we can get by with the finance side, but we do have an actual in-house controller and some accountants that deal with. Jim would actually probably more double as the CFO and CEO, but controller and head of accounting that deal with the day-to-day data input analysis of.
But for you, it was more like your passion and what you wanted to do to be more on the construction.
I just can't sit in the office for 40 hours a week, and so I'd rather sit behind the wheel of my truck than in the office, and so. For the last 20 years, I've spent a good portion of it on the road or in an airport, and that's been more where I've been. So
yeah. So you mentioned it started with just you and your family getting it started really small, and now you said 1,300 employees.
Yeah.
So can you talk about some of the growth and some of the challenges that came with that? As you're growing, you're hiring more employees, maybe even some advice for as people are growing, like how do you know when you need to hire, and maybe best practices for getting good hires?
The good thing for when we first started, we purchased a couple of hotel portfolios that had kind of a regional management in place, and we were able to acquire a couple of key employees that made a big difference in getting from where we were at to where we wanted to be. When they came to work for us, it brought all of their knowledge and years of training, and that helped a whole bunch. So with the hotel industry, you've got a lot of lower level, lower pay scale employees, and then a couple of key, higher wage earners. And as long as the general managers and the regional managers were competent, they've been able to navigate some pretty rough times, with COVID and some other things the last 20 years. So hiring key people is obviously important. And it's funny because, like, with my parents, they had I think at the most that they had before we started Safari, they had 3 hotels that they basically ran with they were partners with a family in St. George, and it was way super hands-on, right? It was like be there once a week or a couple times a week and know exactly what's going on. And when you get to 46 hotels and 1,300 employees, you can't physically know everybody or every single little thing that's going on. And so having those key employees becomes important. And with that, you have to be willing to let a little bit of control go too, because you can't physically keep on top of everything. So
yeah, you got to put a lot of trust.
You got to have a little bit of trust, and you got to have some competent, people to rely on, which we've been fortunate and been able to find. So
yeah, that's and so you mentioned your brother does most of it, but how did you guys decide to choose, as you're expanding, deciding you're in 5 or 6 states now, which states to go to? Did you try to keep them all like fairly close so that you're not traveling clear across the country? And
we bought a hotel in South Texas, which was too far to go for where we were at that point, but we did it. At the time, we were mostly looking for a couple of key metrics with, how they were being operated. That one was a distressed sell, so we did it. We weren't necessarily focused. Well, initially we were focused on something we could drive to within a reasonable amount of time. Mm-hmm. We started St. George. We were St. George Cedar, went to Kanab, finally went to Salt Lake, then went to Ely, Nevada. Somewhere in the middle there, we went to Boise and Twin Falls, and then Pahrump, and then Victoria, Texas somehow slipped through there against our better judgment. But it was more of what was available than necessarily saying we're going to be confined to a certain region at that point. I mean, once you're driving to Boise, you might as well be flying to Victoria, because it's the same amount of time. Right. So we got to the point where location didn't necessarily matter, more what the asset was, what the market was.
Okay.
So,
and I think you mentioned with one of the ones early on, you ended up selling it a couple of years later. Are you ever like flipping hotels, or even if it's not flipping, like run it for a couple of years, make it more profitable and then sell it? Or are you typically looking for?
Most of the time we're looking for long-term. So we built the Holiday Inn Express in Kanab in 2008. We bought Falcon Ridge in Mesquite about the same time, converted it to Holiday Inn Express. A year and a half, 2 years later, we turned around and sold both of those together, and then bought the Shiloh Inn in Salt Lake, which is now the Holiday Inn Express, which is right across from the convention center. So we have been willing to sell and look to sell when there was either a better opportunity or like Victoria, we did sell Victoria just because we wanted to be out of the market. No other reason.
Yeah.
It was just so far removed from everything else that it made sense to get out of it. So, but like right now, we do have a property in Denver that's on the market for sale. Not for any reason other than it's just hasn't been a great performing asset. So that's one we're looking to sell, but we're in the process of purchasing 2 more in eastern Wyoming, and so we're still in expansion. Yeah, we're still in expansion mode. So
okay,
not like it was 7-8 years ago, but
right. And so you mentioned you were still buying in 2007. So did 2007 through 2009, was that, I'm sure, a pretty scary time for you? Like
the good thing for us at that point was we were just starting to buy, and so
then
there were lots of opportunities for us at that point.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't so much crashing everything you've built, but it made it a little easier for you to get in, probably.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of those properties.
Yep.
So I'm sure that was, because that was a really challenging time for most people. But then being in the hotel industry, you depend a lot on tourism. So then we get to 2020 and have COVID. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you had there and maybe some of the things you did to overcome those challenges?
COVID was really interesting from what we were doing, just because I was actually in the process. We had purchased an assisted living complex in Stillwater, Oklahoma, that was a bank had taken it back and were trying to get it off their books, and we went out, and another crazy story, but decided to get into that. And so I went out and spent 2 years getting it constructed with my dad. The 2 of us alternated weeks going to Stillwater, and so COVID was rough in that period for that industry. But with the hotels, where we were at, Cedar, St. George, you've got all the national parks, Kanab. We're in rural areas, and what happened in most of the rural areas during COVID, I mean, people they wanted to go and get out of the cities. And so COVID, although it was challenging, wasn't as bad in most of our markets. There were some that were difficult. Downtown Salt Lake, Denver, it was rough, but the other markets that we were in just saw so much of an influx of people for getting outside that it really could have been way worse for being in the hotel business than where we were. So we were in decent markets for it.
So did some of them actually perform better then, because that's like the one place that people were traveling to?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the timing, there was such an appreciation in real estate assets with the inflation and everything else. So we had built or bought these hotels at X price, and the price has gone up. And as people were building them at the higher price, which we weren't, we were just in kind of purchase mode at the time. They had paid way more money to build their properties. That brought the rates up, and so our rates obviously followed with the market. So although COVID was rough, we had some good years, especially following COVID, right as kind of came out of it. So
okay.
But
so one other thing that I get asked this all the time, and I hear it asked all the time to lots of business owners, but especially where you're in business with family members, it's all family members as partners. A lot of people will say, never do business with family, never get into business with family. Can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe some of the challenges and what you would tell somebody if they're asking you, I have this business idea, I want to go into it with my brother. Is that a bad idea, a good idea?
For us, it wasn't a bad idea. That's not to say that there weren't a lot of challenges or a fair share of challenges. The biggest problem obviously comes from somebody thinks they're getting the short end of the stick, which really was nice with how my dad set things up. It wasn't, okay, you're out of college, you're going to get 25%, you're in college, you're going to get 15%, you're in high school, you're getting 5%. It was, if we're going to do this and I'm going to help you start it and I'm going to help fund it to start, we're going 20, 20, 20, 20. So which I had some problems, but in the long run, it was the only way to do it, to make it to where there wasn't that internal or family conflict, I think. Not that there hasn't been some conflict, but it had minimized it for sure, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure, at least initially, then the oldest is, well, why is the youngest getting as much when they're not doing anything yet? And so lots of challenges there. But for anybody...
But I don't know that I would say... I'd have a hard time discouraging someone to do it. I mean, I've got our personal example where it's worked fine. Like I wouldn't change it. I've got a couple of other friends that have been successful with it, and we'll see, because right now we're just starting to kind of get to that next generation. My oldest is 20, and he's the oldest of all the grandkids. And so we'll see the next 5 years. I think that's where your bigger conflict comes.
Right, how the next generation takes over.
Yep. So, but I think at the same time, if you can communicate and have some sort of structure and plan, I mean, I think it's doable.
Yeah. So has that been? Have you guys been working on that? I'm sure already. Then just
we don't have anything
trying to figure out what it.
We don't have anything in place yet, but we've obviously been kicking around ideas and thoughts, and we'll see how it shakes out. Because we've still, the way I look at it, we've got 5 to 10 years before it really becomes an issue. So
so that's
we're right in
that.
We're right in the we're right in the planning phase. Of that. So
okay.
But
well, my next question, I was going to ask, like, what are some of the keys to your success as a business, but also on that front too, like if you do go into business with family, do you have some rules maybe of like family gatherings? This is just fun family time and no talking business.
We didn't ever really have much fun family time. It was only business, I think. But we had fun, but there was always that undertone of work was always obviously there. I don't know. That's an interesting question, because it's, I don't know. I think the communication part, everybody being on the same page, is what there has to be to make it work. You're like with us, you've got 4 spouses and 4 siblings that are trying to all work together and intermingle. And the one advantage I think that we had is we had the growth. If you go into an industry or you're going to start a business that's going to tap out at $1 million valuation, and there's 3 of you, that's one thing. But if you can grow it to $10 million and there's 3 of you, it just gives you a little more room to, take responsibility for other things. And as long as somebody has a responsibility and can be productive, and you have that mindset of growth, I think that eliminates a lot of the problem. I wouldn't recommend going into a business with somebody that says, I'm going to go buy something and this is what it's going to be and what it's going to always be, and go do it with 3 partners or 3 siblings, just because I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think you have to have the growth mindset to where we're all going to pitch in, we're all going to have to work hard. I think that alleviates a lot of it if you're able to grow what you're doing.
Right. So that way it doesn't have to be all of you fighting over that set piece.
The pie isn't, the pie's not defined. The pie essentially can be endless if you can come up with how to make it that way, I guess, if you have that mentality. So
awesome. So looking back now over the last 20 years or so, and how much you've grown, the success that you've seen, what would you say are some of the keys to the success and why you've been so successful?
So this would have been 2010 maybe. And the only reason I think we were just talking about it the other day, we were driving home from Ely. We had bought a hotel over there. And it was a 3-hour drive, and there's no other way to get there other than sit in the car for 3 hours. And usually we all went together, the 3 of us. Jace was gone he was either on a mission or at college, I don't even remember. But so me, Jim, Logan, Wes, the 4 of us, we spent a lot of time driving back and forth. And at that time, we're like, man, it would be cool if we could get to 20 hotels. And so we were talking the other day, we're like, man, that wasn't that long ago. We thought 20 was like the number. Right. And it blew right through that. And I think, to go back and answer your question, is you've got to to achieve any level of success, I think you've got to dream big and plan big and work hard to try and make it happen. If you think you're only going to ever have one property or one thing, you probably will only have one thing. So you're going to have 20, maybe end up with 40. I don't know. Yeah. There's just this level of dreaming and, you know, the aspiration to do something bigger or better. And with that, there comes a lot of challenges too, because necessarily bigger isn't always necessarily better.
Right.
So you've got to take those steps to master whatever your trade is or whatever you're doing, and then expand it from there. So that's kind of my take on it, I think.
Yeah, that's great. So, and I should have given you more of a heads up about this question, but are there any specific challenges or failures that you've had throughout your career that Safari as a whole has had that they experienced, and then how did you overcome those or change things and pivot to correct those?
I think there's been times where we've looked at markets that have been growing, like take Page or Moab, for example. And both of those markets we looked at early, like 2006, 7, 8, you know, right when we were getting started. And
before everybody,
yeah. I mean, we're right in our backyard, and you look back and you think, how do you miss Moab and Page when, I mean, Lake Powell, 3 weeks of summer sometime, you know? So it's like, how do you miss, you know, that? So there were some things like that you can't hit. You can't see everything and you can't do everything. But I think there were times where you think, oh, somebody did start a hotel there right when we're thinking about doing it. Like, we don't want to take that added risk. But there were some of those for sure.
Maybe like it felt like missed opportunities.
Missed opportunities. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas, but overall, we tried to be as aggressive as we dared. We didn't want to bite off more than we could chew.
And did you all feel like you were pretty much on the same page as you're making those decisions, or was there sometimes
there was some back and forth?
Like, no, let's do it, and the other, no, I don't think that's the best idea.
Yeah, we had some of that. My dad obviously was in a different situation than us. We were getting started. He was ready to be winding down a little bit, but he was great to support us in whatever decision we made too. And so in the end, he'd always say, you guys decide, and if the four of you can't decide, then I'll cast the final vote, you know. And so we were, generally speaking, able to get on the same page. So we were lucky in that regard. Everybody kind of had the same appetite for risk, willingness to, you know, do whatever the work was that needed done to make it happen.
Yeah. So this next question, maybe you and your brothers feel differently about it too, so maybe you can speak on their behalf. But what would you say was the most helpful for you in your like professional development? Like, was getting your degree in schooling helpful? Was the lessons you learned as a kid as you were growing up with parents that owned it the most helpful, or things you learned on the job as an adult? Or what helped you the most?
What helped us the most is who our dad was. Mm-hmm. I mean, you cut through everything else. Him, and you can't just say him, who my parents were, because they worked together. They liked the business aspect of it. They liked the development, the growth. And from the time we were little, it wasn't, you know, some people don't want to talk about work when they get home. That's all they talked about. And so we grew up, you know, understanding the fact that there was an importance to having a good relationship with a bank and a banker, and monthly financial statements from an accountant, so you knew where you stood on a monthly basis. We grew up not being afraid of debt, kind of because of that too, which in our industry, I mean, you've got $600 million worth of real estate, but there's a good chunk of debt that's associated with that. And so Understanding the debt and the risks associated with it helped a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that was all stuff that was, taught or we heard. It wasn't even sit down and be taught it. It was just listening to it, hearing it, watching it.
You had been around it your whole,
Yeah,
so it's not
forever.
like didn't go to business school and you're learning a whole new vocabulary
Yeah.
of all the business terms. You've
Exactly.
been around it your whole life.
Obviously, the college aspect, the degree was good. The finance degree, my dad always pushed us, said, you guys need to go and learn accounting, be an accountant. We got in there, both me and Jim started college about the same time. We're only a year apart, and I think kept our majors as accounting, both of us, for one semester before we were out, right? And my sister, though, that married Logan, she ended up getting her accounting degree, and she's a huge asset to, through the whole process as well. So, the stuff we learned in college, the connections, some of the more intricate stuff with, finance and understanding markets and loans and interest, for sure helped. But.
Right. Is there anything that your parents, you think, did intentionally, like just always, like, it sounds like you worked on it for as long as you could remember, you were helping work in the business as well, but are there specific things that your parents intentionally did that you think helped you and your siblings so much?
I think they intentionally talked about it. Like, I think they exposed us to all of it, like the good and the bad. Like, it wasn't, oh, we're not going to say this because it's, that it's bad. If somebody was struggling, or a friend or a company was going out of business, bankrupt, they didn't hide it. Like, we knew about it. And so we're able to be aware of what maybe some of the consequences were, what the opportunities were. I remember from forever knowing, hearing numbers that were, the numbers were way smaller then than they are now, but hearing numbers that sounded big, right? And so it made you not quite so scared of a big number. And when you cut right through everything else, I mean, the understanding the numbers part of it, whatever business you're in, that's the key, is knowing what you really can make and what it's going to take to do that, what it's going to cost and what your revenue can be. And
okay. So. And you mentioned, so your oldest is 20. Have you involved your kids in the business as well? And do all of them want to be involved in the business?
Yeah. So like I said, I don't work 100% of my day isn't Safari Hospitality related. Yeah. Mostly what I do now is residential and commercial development and construction. So I haven't involved my kids as much in the hospitality side, but I did take both of them, the two oldest, they're only a year apart. We built a couple of houses together. I opened them both trading accounts and said, hey, go knock yourself out, see what you can do, with a couple $1,000 in a, Robinhood account, they can go and you can learn a whole bunch, by, doing that. And so they were able to, dip their toe in the real estate side of it, especially. We'll see. They're both in Argentina on missions right now, but when they both get back, we'll see what they decide to do from there. So,
what direction they're going in.
Yeah.
So is doing the residential and commercial development, then is that a separate business that you've started?
No, we're all it's all
connected as part of it, but that's
just where that's where I'm at.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
So
cool. Well, I want to make sure we leave time for questions from the audience, but one other question I wanted to ask you. So most of the audience here, there's entrepreneurs, either already own a business, looking to start a business, want to own or manage a business in the future. Are there any tips or advice that you can give them that would be applicable across many different industries?
I think, like I said for a second before, the biggest thing I think is understanding where you're at financially, like what your monthly financials or at a minimum quarterly financials, I think, are imperative to knowing how you're doing. Like you can think you're making a ton of money, and at the end of the day, you're like, where did it all go, right? And so have an understanding of where you're at that way, I think, is important. I think it's important too to find a business that you can scale and understanding how you can scale it. Right now, obviously, the biggest thing I think is trying to get a grasp on how does AI and technology affect where you're at and where you want to go. Jim was having a conversation with our corporate attorney the other day, and he's just like, asked him, he says, how do you feel about AI? He's like, well, for me or for somebody that's in third year of law school? He's like, for me, I'm 55. I can be done tomorrow if I have to. The guys that are coming out of law school better figure something out, because I can do 2 or 3 times as much work in a quarter of the time, which is great for me today, because I can use what AI is today and bill 2 or 3 times as much for half the work. But if I'm 25, just coming out of law school, there's some red flags there that you got to kind of be aware of. And so I think understanding the technology side of it more today than at any time, obviously in my career of 25 years, it hasn't been that big of an issue, right? You've always been able to, I've worked with lots of contractors that all their billing and everything else is still by hand and on paper. And that's been fine. But there's a lot of industries that obviously are going to change in the next 5 years even, I think, with what's going on that way. So I think understanding that and being aware of that and being agile enough to pivot to take advantage of it too, but to know where your industry's headed.
Right. Make sure you're not getting into something that
that's going to be obsolete in 5 years.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. Let's open it up to the audience if anybody has questions for Jeff.
Did Airbnb created challenges for you? If so, how did you face them, or were they kind of not an issue?
It's hard to say it's been an issue globally for us, because our numbers haven't declined with the increase in Airbnb. A market like Kanab, there has been some negative effect in Kanab, just because, I mean, the sheer number of Airbnb units and nightly rental units in Kane County has affected the hotel industry a little bit there. I don't know that Airbnb I don't think that Airbnb is going to make hotels go away or become obsolete, put it that way. If COVID wouldn't have happened and some of the foreign travel wouldn't have gone away and still hasn't come back, I think that even Kanab wouldn't be in a problem just because of Airbnb. I think there's some other aspects of it that have hindered that market. But I think there's some opportunities with Airbnb if you're in the right location. I think the days of going to Parowan, Utah and saying I'm going to open an Airbnb and think I'm going to make good money on it, those days, I think there were times when that would work, but I think today those days are probably behind us. So, yeah.
I just want to know what's going up next to the courtyard.
Oh, that's going to be our new corporate office. So, Safari Hospitality will be the 3rd floor. Joe Burgess Construction will be half of the 2nd floor, and then there's a dental practice that's going to go into the 1st floor, and then we'll just lease the other half of the 2nd floor. So, sometime next year we'll finish that up.
Thank you.
Talking about scalability and just the numbers game, the market's going to go up. You're going to have your busier seasons, your a little bit slower seasons. But where do you guys look at setting like your profit margins? Like, because if you're going to scale, you got to have at least enough of a profit margin to bring somebody else on, because then they're just going a huge chunk of your profit.
Yeah.
So where do you think you should be? I know, I'm sorry.
Um,
That's kind of complex, but I mean, we just started our business a few months ago. And we do want to scale it. We definitely want to scale it for sure. And I think that's going to be coming by, like, hoping by next end of summer, we'll be able to scale with a couple employees.
I think it's kind of a function of how much work you're physically able to do, how much money you can make, and then getting your growth to a certain point to where you know you've got to bring somebody else on, bringing them on, and then taking that step. I don't know that each industry is going to be different as far as what that profit margin is.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of what the total dollar amount is that you've got that you can throw at your growth, right? Like you can be making 30 or 40% profit margins, and if that only is equaling $50,000, you're going to be hard pressed to grow. But if you're making a 10% profit margin, and at the end of the day that's $150,000, then you have a little bit of room to hire and to. So I think that total number is probably more important than what the percentage is.
Right. Okay. And then my second question was, and sorry for anybody else that has questions. When you were doing like your acquisitions, were you doing mostly just acquiring already established and then kind of like rehabbing them and making them more profitable as opposed to just building?
So when we started, like I said, when my parents especially were the ones that were calling the shots, it was 100% construction. New construction, we're gonna build locally. Cedar, St. George was the only places they were really interested in being. Hence not going to Page or Moab. But now I lost my train of thought. As we look to, it was easier when you're scaling to buy than to build.
Right.
I mean, you can just do it so much quicker. Day one, you've got revenue coming in. You're not having to wait for, business to build up.
Right.
So
before after you became Safari,
mm-hmm.
so you're more just like on acquisitions as far as like established businesses already. When did you guys actually like start building new? And would you say, obviously it's not as many builds as acquisitions, but.
Yeah. So like here, we're building the Hampton Inn on Main Street right now.
Yeah.
And the only reason, not the only reason, but the biggest reason that we did that was Hilton wasn't going to rebrand our Hampton on the other end of town.
Right.
And so it was like, do we lose the Hampton franchise, which in our opinion is, probably our number one franchise. So we're like, we'd rather us own the Hampton Inn in Cedar City than them take it from us and go sell it to somebody else. As far as construction for us, it's been the last 7-8 years especially. We've only built if we've either had the property or we needed to secure a franchise for the area. Like when we built the courtyard here, we felt like we had the Spring Hill. We didn't want somebody else to come build a courtyard. The market looked like it was ready for another higher end property, so we built the courtyard.
Right.
So
most of them, if they weren't already in the franchise, like I heard you mention Holiday Inn several times.
mm-hmm.
So if they weren't already in the franchise, did you take like maybe more of like a mom and pop thing that was still viable and just convert it over?
Yeah.
to the
So
franchise?
when we built the Shiloh Inn in Salt Lake, there was only like 15, I think, Shiloh Inns by this point. At one point, I think there was 30 or 40. But so we purchased the Shiloh Inn, which is right on the corner of West Temple and 200 South, so downtown Salt Lake.
Right.
And that's exactly what we did. We bought it as a Shiloh, immediately went to Holiday Inn, secured the Holiday Inn Express franchise, and spent 18 months basically
Rehabbing.
completely renovating it. Yep.
Interesting.
So, we did that there. We did that Falcon Ridge in Mesquite, turned into Holiday Inn Express as well. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there if you can find the right product. Yep.
And then that would, I would assume that, like you were talking about, like relationships with bank, you already had a relationship with Holiday Inn, so it's probably easier
Yep.
going forward to just be like, hey, we want to do this.
And that's the,
And they're probably like,
okay, you can do it.
okay.
And with, so Holiday Inn Express, Marriott, or IHG is Holiday Inn, Marriott and Hilton, those three franchises obviously are the three that we prefer to, and that's the top three in the industry. And so if they come to the, Intermountain West and they have a good location, we're at least on the short list of people that they'll contact if they, think that there's a market that something needs to be built in. So.
Okay. Let's go. Bo.
So I'm kind of want to go back to her initial question. When you were scaling and things started to get uncomfortable, did service suffer a little bit? And you look at each other, we need to get some people hired. You know what I mean? Was it more like that, or did you kind of have more of a metric to measure that and say, okay, before we get there, let's hire these so that we're not that service doesn't suffer and that 5-star, mentality.
Yeah. So on the hotel side, we always had to be service oriented, like as far as what our service scores were from our customers, because Holiday Inn Express or IHG, Hilton, Marriott, they're always obviously monitoring that. So that part was easier to maybe keep up on. We had some growing pains on the regional side where you have, instead of 6 or 7 general managers that say Wes has to interact with, gets up to 15, and then you're like, that's probably a little much, right? And so from that standpoint, there definitely some times where there was some strain on our capacity, and that was really the time it was easier to see, okay, we better do something different, add another person, add another layer of management to help facilitate all of it. So.
Other questions? Yeah, Kristen?
Do you think Cedar City is at the point where it could, say, have a ballroom for like 500 people or something like that?
It's a good question. I think that it's got to be getting close to that. Our conventions, we have decent sized convention space at the courtyard, and it stays, busy. St. George, we're connected to the convention center with the Hilton Garden Inn, and that convention center is busy. It's one of those things where it's like, we're probably to that point that it would be nice to have it. But we're probably not far away from it. The interesting thing with where we're at size-wise, just in general, in Cedar City now, if you take St. George from the day that they hit 50,000 residents to where they're at today, there's been some ups and downs with the real estate market, but after they hit that 50,000, the dips have been way shallower than what Cedar City has been. But Cedar City, I think now feels like we're at that 50,000 mark or close, and I think there's a good chance we hit that same kind of trajectory. Not saying that we won't have ups and downs, but I think the downs will be more shallow than what they have. There's been times, like my dad talks about, in the early 80s, and then there were times in the 90s too, where, it was hard to, keep a construction crew busy here. Whereas St. George, there's been some of those times, but they've been way shorter. So I think we're at an interesting spot here where we're at with our size right now.
Okay, any other questions? I think just one other I had was I obviously working here at the Innovation Center and supporting local businesses. I think I've just never really thought about it like, when I'm traveling other places, I could still support a local business. Do you guys have a way, like, can people book directly like through Safari Hospitality if they're looking to like, we would rather support you guys
We-
when we're traveling? Or
It's hard because all of our properties are franchised, and every franchise has their own reservation type system. Our website does show what properties we do have, but the only other, short of calling Wes, which I do send people to him occasionally, he probably gets sick of me, but most of the easiest way to book is still through the actual franchise's website.
okay.
So
So still supporting you guys that way just by knowing where you're
it
at,
doesn't
but-
change. It doesn't change anything for us if Wes calls and makes the reservation versus somebody getting on Hilton.com and making the reservation isn't any different from our standpoint.
Okay,
So
makes sense.
I just had a question with that. You guys currently have 46 properties, right? Is there a long-term goal that it's 100 on this list?
we had 20. We had that 20 as a goal, and then it just kind of blew past it. Now, I don't know that there's a specific goal in mind.
With the system you guys have built, though, like adding those extra properties, I know you have to add different layers of management, but overall, you've built a pretty good level.
We could grow to 100 properties, but I would say it's unlikely that we would get to 100 properties. Say in the next, if you took the same, we're not going to grow at the same trajectory we have for the last 20 years for the next 20, just because the industry as a whole has, I mean, it's grown a lot. And
And
so
another question with that, is there ever a time where the franchise model would be replaced when you guys have your own brand?
that's an interesting question too. You think about it and you think with the internet, with all of social media, with other ways to market and to reach people, it seems like there would be a way to,
Especially be localized.
yeah, to cut out that. The problem is so many travelers there's so many corporate travelers, so many travelers want their Hilton point system that I don't know that for us, it doesn't make sense. It's expensive to be a franchisee, but the benefit is you have a built-in clientele that they want their points. They want to stay. They want to know when they stay at a Hampton Inn, they know what they're getting. So I don't see that being the thing for us.
Yeah, you kind of inherit that trust.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's give Jeff a round of applause.